All right, I am pleased to have our next guest on. He's a former military man, and he is standing up to the climate change debacle, the lie that's out there, the modus operandi for these people to get world government and a carbon tax for every global citizen, as they call them. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing great, Jason.
So why don't you just, for the listeners, go over an overview of your past military experience and why you've taken an interest in the Climategate situation?
Sure. Just briefly, I was in the Underwater Demolition Team 21 and SEAL Team 2 back in the early 70s. And the reason why I'm trying to be on top of this whole Climategate thing is once I heard about these files being leaked or hacked from East Anglia, I knew this was it. This was the Achilles heel. And as Alex said, just redouble and redouble and redouble efforts to bring this out, keep it out, put it on the front burner, and keep it on the front burner. Just this is it, man. We got to go after this and pound at it.
Absolutely. And with these world leaders, just to continue with their operation, to not say, oh, my God, this has been exposed as a fraud. We shouldn't go to this Copenhagen Treaty. I mean, I've got headlines out of Reuters right now that the carbon market out of the European Union, yet another step towards global governance, is up 2% today. How is that possible now that we have exposed that man-made climate change, as they call it, is nothing but a fraud? Let's go over some of the highlights of your article. Attention lawyers make millions off of Climategate crooks. Let's talk about this. What do you think are some of the hot points of this?
Well, I love the idea of going after them in a legal way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no tort reform in the health care bill because there's so many lawyers on the left, and we need to switch that around. There are a great number of patriotic, conservative lawyers, and if they start suing the various agencies and individuals involved in Climategate, I think, well, number one, that'll keep it on the front burner. And number two, they're going to make a lot of money. And number three, it'll bring it out to the public's awareness.
Absolutely. And this isn't really a new idea. The co-founder of the Weather Channel, John Coleman, I believe it was last summer, actually said, you know what, we should go after Al Gore and his minions and supporters and sue them for fraud. This was before these emails came out. Let's not forget these emails were leaked to the mainstream press. I believe it was something like 6 weeks before they actually hit the net. And bloggers started to pick up on it, and then they could not ignore that these emails were actually real. Obviously, the media and the elite have a vested interest in suppressing this information so lawyers don't do what you just said they should do, and that's go after these criminals and make a pretty penny doing so.
Absolutely. The media has painted themselves into a corner, and they can't get out of it without getting egg all over their face. It's unbelievable what a big cover-up is going on. It's the biggest news story in world history, and they're like, oh, well, whatever. And
exactly. And I mean, you have the press secretary, Gibbs, getting up on television. When he's asked about Climategate, he says, well, that doesn't really matter because most people still believe in man-made climate change. And it doesn't matter. Barack Obama is still going to go to this Copenhagen Treaty. Let's hope that he doesn't sign some kind of a treaty or a referendum, or they put out a communique in which he pledges us to cut our carbon emissions. And it's not cutting our carbon emissions. It's taxing everybody for living and breathing. Let me read some of this article, which is up over at Infowars.com right now. Idiots, crooks, and criminals. There are only around 24 individuals directly involved in the criminal fraud committed by climatology scientists. Did you hear that, folks? Only around 24. These people, or as Lord Monckton calls them, idiots, crooks, and criminals, should be tried in an international court for crimes against humanity. Agreed. These people are already responsible for the deaths of millions of people worldwide. Let's stop right there and discuss that. Because as they subsidize things like corn for ethanol, they are taking away food from third world nations, and people are literally starving to death, yes?
Absolutely. The far left has historically been very enamored of population control. And some people will say that's why they banned DDT. But regardless, they want to cut down on the world's population, and they've discussed various ways of doing this. And no doubt, starvation is one of them. And it's one of the reasons. The other being that they want to wipe out the middle class. But it's what population control is one of the reasons why they're cutting back on America's food production.
Absolutely, and let's not forget people like Kissinger and institutes like the United Nations have talked about using food as a weapon. That's right, food as a weapon. Let's read some more of this article. Their insistent, loud, hysteric calls for CO2 reduction, or else, have resulted in the implementation of laws that have bilked taxpayers, corporations, and entire countries out of billions of dollars, and not to mention really put another arm in their command and control cashless society control grid. You look at the Netherlands, they have passed laws now that by 2011, each car will be taxed by the mile, and they'll do this by installing a GPS device in each vehicle and taxing you by the kilometer. By the kilometer. Think about how crazy that is. They're using carbon as an excuse not only to tax you, but track, trace, and database you daily as you're in your vehicle. This is wild stuff, Jim. Did you ever think that this would be being implemented globally? I mean, when you see it coming to the United States and you are a veteran, you have served for this country, doesn't it just turn your stomach?
Oh, it's unbelievable to me, but at the same time, you got to believe it. It's happening. But fortunately, many people are waking up to what's going on, and I think that I know that this Climategate is going to wake a lot of people. There's going to be a huge upheaval.
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope that the listeners out there are just seeing this as a beginning when Penn State says it will investigate Climategate, when Inhofe is asking Barbara Boxer to start a congressional investigation into the possible, and it's not possible, and it's not probable, it's the proven conspiracy in Climategate. When the man has to step down, when he has to step down from his position as a university professor, when these ghouls have to destroy all the original data and find a way to get away from Freedom of Information Act requests, I mean, that's like having not only the blood on their hands, but spattered all over their body as well.
Yep, and the mass media is like, well, what problem? We don't see it.
Well, when you see the leftists out there, the globalist leftists such as George Moonbayat, and I keep bringing him up because he is an unapologetic globalist who has called for global governance, who has written a book called The New World Order, who now has pieces out there saying, look, we can't ignore Climategate and we can't act like these emails exist, but we have to point out that most people are misinterpreting what the emails mean, and they're just too dumb to understand that climate change is real. And then he uses what I consider a disgusting term for anybody who questions man-made climate change, which is nothing more than a hoax, a proven hoax, folks. He calls them climate change deniers, trying to associate us with Holocaust denial, and that, again, is beyond repulsive.
It's the whole term climate change it's so generic. What does it mean? Well, it can mean anything they want it to mean.